No, Ted Lieu, what are you doing? Saying you would love to regulate speech? What is this all about? Maybe you guys have seen the story, it's going crazy. Ted Lieu, he's a Democrat from California, said he would love to regulate speech. Oh no, this is the worst thing ever. I have seen this link shared far and wide. It's popping up on Reddit. And now I'm going to say what needs to be said to you, Ted Lieu. I'm sorry that everyone's yelling at you. You didn't really do anything wrong. This is a ridiculous story. There's a lot of conservative sites that are sharing this around, criticizing Lieu because he said he would love to regulate speech but can't. You need to look at what he actually said. Because while I do think it's fair to lightly criticize the comment, it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not that big a deal and 10 being a huge deal, it's like a 2. It's like, yeah, dude, don't even joke about that because it's going to make problems for yourself. But what ends up happening is there's blood in the water. And we're going to see all these different news sites. We got Fox News. We've got Real Clear Politics. Real Clear Politics isn't as bad. Even in Reason, they talk about it. But let's look at someone. There's two sources that are actually being rather fair about it. And what I want to do is I want to break down that in reality, there are some conservative sites that are doing a damn good job of making sure the context is clear. And there are a lot of clickbaity sites that are trying to manipulate people. For the most part, the social media posts I see about Ted Lieu are taking his statement out of context. And I'm no fan of out of context statement. Because when I watched the actual interview he did, I was like, oh, he said something pretty good actually. Yeah, he maybe didn't word it so well. Look at the story from the National Review. Ted Lieu admits he would love to regulate speech, but concedes it's harmful in the long run. He wasn't actually talking about how he would love to regulate speech in the interview. He was using a turn of phrase. He said, I'd love to regulate speech, but the First Amendment prevents that, and it's actually better in the long run that we have this intact. We have free speech. He's not literally saying he's got his eyes on speech he wants to control. He was just making a point about the importance of free speech, and it's being taken out of context. Let's read what they say. Representative Ted Lieu said he would love to regulate the content of speech, but is prevented from doing so by the First Amendment during a Wednesday appearance on CNN. Following Google CEO Sundar Pichai's hearing before the Judiciary Committee, CNN host Brianna Kailar asked Lieu if he and his colleagues should have spent more time asking about the platform's efforts to counter the dissemination of conspiracy theories and hate speech. It's a very good point you make, Lieu said. I would love if I could have more than 5 minutes to question witnesses. Unfortunately, I don't get that opportunity. However, I would love to be able to regulate the content of speech. The First Amendment prevents me from doing so, and that's simply a function of the First Amendment. But I think over the long run, it's better the government does not regulate the content of speech. I completely agree with what he said, 100%. Dude, don't get me wrong. I think I'm right most of the time. I think I'm wrong sometimes, but I tend to think I'm right. And I'd be willing to bet that most of you think you're right most of the time too. What ends up happening is it is a very commonly held belief that if we were given the chance, we could, not all of us, because I think there's a lot of us who are more on the libertarian side of the political spectrum, either left or right, who kind of just concede we're not smart enough to regulate speech. But come on, man. People have put up such complete nonsense about me. I'd love to be able to go delete. What about when CNN says Donald Trump, did X, Y, and Z, and it's a lie? You'd love to be like, that's a lie, take it down. We would all love to be able to take out the information we don't like. I think he was just making an interesting point. He shouldn't say I. He should have said, I think most people would love the idea that they could control what other people say. And that's why the First Amendment is important. The issue I take here is that I think a lot of more clickbaity sites jumped on this because they were like, oh, the Democrats want to regulate speech. He said it, taking his quote out of context. Then you have the National Review, you have Real Clear Politics, you have other right-wing sites that are trying to put the context back in while still telling everyone here's what really happened. I think I'm doing the same thing essentially, because National Review said concedes it's harmful in the wrong one, but I feel like the framing of this headline is still kind of trying to push it. Look, it's fair to say that people of all political stripes have a tendency to try and take a win when they see one. They're willing to take advantage of a political situation. Let's flip over to Real Clear Politics because I feel like they did a much better breakdown, to be honest. And let me say this, why am I talking about it? The story's kind of gone viral. I'm seeing this pop up on various subreddits. And that's probably why Real Clear Politics write about it. They said, Democratic Representative Lieu, I would love to regulate free speech, but it's better in the long run not to. There you go, right? Rep. Ted Lieu said Wednesday that he would love to regulate the content of speech, but it would be illegal to do so due to the First Amendment. And then they just break down the statement. So going back to the National Review, I want to jump down because it actually goes beyond that. Ted Lieu tweeted something similar. During the hearing, Lieu dismissed his colleagues' concerns about the potential implications of anti-conservative bias among Google employees and its implications for the operation of the company's search algorithm by reading positive and negative stories that he had surfaced when he Googled his Republican colleagues' names. Tyler praised Lieu for the clever ploy during the interview. In a Tuesday tweet sent prior to his CNN appearance, Lieu expressed a similar desire to regulate speech, but also acknowledged that the government censorship is harmful in the long term. Matt Stoller said, "I get it. The Diamond and Silk hearing was idiotic. Many of the GOP types are just bullying. But Google is a real policy problem, incredibly dangerous, and as an institution that controls our ad markets, it's worth taking very seriously. It is." Ted Lieu said, "I agree there are serious issues, but the speech issues are protected by the First Amendment. Would I like to regulate Fox News? Yes, but I can't because the First Amendment stops me, and that's ultimately a good thing in the long run." I completely agree. So for those that are watching, I'm wondering how many people saw this story and got angry and felt like the Democrats were this Democrat guy was trying to regulate your speech and wanted to shut you down, when in reality, he's actually being rather nuanced and intelligent about the issue. How many fake news stories have come out about me? In the wake of Sargon being banned from Patreon, how many fake news stories came out about him? Mashable ran a story calling him an alt-right conspiracy theorist. It's absolutely ridiculous. Is it fair to say that Sargon has said things that are wrong? Yes. Is it fair to call him a conspiracy theorist? No, of course not. Simply being wrong about something doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist. And I'll tell you what right now, I would love, it would be so emotionally satisfying to me, as I'm sure it would be to you, to find the people who are lying about all of us and say, you can't do that anymore. Delete that post. But we can't because of the First Amendment. Now, admittedly, I think people more likely to be on the right are willing to concede that it sucks, that these lies are happening. It really does, that the fake news gets pumped out every single day and it gets crazy. I mean, look at the stuff with PewDiePie. It's insane. The out-of-context quotes, the misrepresentations of what actually happened in these circumstances, but we can't, and that's the First Amendment. I'm going to tell you a story. In 2012, or I think it was the end of 2011, I filmed an interview with a high-ranking police officer, a detective, I believe, in Philadelphia during Occupy Wall Street live stream. And the thing that was crazy about it is that police never give interviews. A few days later, someone pointed out that Stephen Colbert had used my interview as a prop in a comedy piece about internet videos. And I was upset. I said he used my video, which I produced for news, as a prop in his show. He shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I spoke with a lawyer, and the lawyer explained to me he should be able to do that. It's called free speech. It's called fair use. It's protected, and it should be. Naturally, I was younger and I was upset. Now that I'm older, I realize it actually is a really good thing that we're allowed to comment and reference other people's content and do these things. Don't get me wrong. There's a balance between someone's protected copyright and what you are or are not allowed to say. And I was upset for a few reasons. They were making fun of something that I was extremely proud of. Colbert had this thing. It was called I don't know what it was called. But it had like a grid of videos that were shot on cell phones, and one of them was an interview I did, juxtaposed between videos of goats yelling and people slipping on banana peels. And I said, what they took from me in no way fits the context of what they're saying. They're just insulting me, and they're using my copyrighted content without my permission. And I was told they're allowed to. And it's right. They should be able to. It's not, as much as I was angry, and I did want them to take that content down, it is not within my power as an individual to tell people what they mean when they say something or to determine that an interpretation is or is not acceptable. On that regard, I want to comment just really quickly on what happened with Sargon and Patreon. Sargon was told by Patreon that he needs to prove why what he said was not hate speech. And he said it's an interpretation. How can he prove a negative? How can he prove something isn't something if you interpret it to be so? You're simply asking him to lobby you to convince them that it makes sense. And thus we can see the problem of why policing speech really is a bad thing and why Ted Lieu was actually correct in what he was saying. Of course we'd love to do this. Patreon would love to do it, and they did. And look what happens. And that's why I think, look, the people who watch my videos, I'm sure you are more likely to be in line with recognizing why it would be a problem if we did have the power to remove news stories we didn't like, if we did have the power to remove fake news. because it would be used against us. And that's why Ted Lieu is correct. I believe him. I believe he'd love to regulate speech, but he said it twice. He says it's ultimately a good thing in the long run that we can't regulate speech in this way. So no free passes, for anybody. You want to take Ted Lieu out of context? I'm gonna call you out for that too. Look, I don't know a lot about what his policies, positions are, what he believes, but I think this is unfair to take this quote from him and make it seem like he's trying to shut down the First Amendment when in reality he was defending it, and he was making a cogent point about the desire within all of us to control information that we don't like, but the reality that we are all prevented from doing so. Thanks for hanging out. Time for me to go, but I will see you tomorrow on the main channel at 4 p.m. Take care.